Hi, this is Maddison Miles, and you're watching Loudmouth Presents Over the Top Rope.
Okay,
This
ladies
meeting
and
is being.
ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages and denominations, we said we would have her back, and she looks relaxed. Shall we say Canada re-energizes you?
Yes, 100%. Canada
Okay.
is the best re-energizer out there.
All right, Maddison Miles, fresh off a weekend of professional wrestling out of the top draw. This past weekend's events, RVD was on the bill as well, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, yeah, just for Saturday. So I wrestled Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and he was on the Saturday show.
Okay. Gee, Thursday, Friday, Saturday as well.
So Thursday and Friday were Charlie Haas and Robbie McAllister on those
Okay.
shows.
All right.
Yeah,
Fantastic. A lot of bumps and bruises, or was it plain
just
sailing?
just a couple little bruises, lots of nice chop marks going on, but
Fair enough.
that's about it. Nothing too shabby.
Do you also suffer from what I like to call the UWI, the unidentified wrestling injury?
100%, yes.
Yeah, it's so funny. You're like, okay, nobody was near my arm, but why have I got a bruise there? Or I got a
Exactly.
bruise on my leg. No one was near my leg.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
about it. To be fair, I didn't do too bad this weekend injury wise. Just like I said, like I don't know where that came from, but that's the arm I hit with, so not really surprising, but
Yeah.
you know,
I got this. I
everyone.
got this like beauty spot mark on my forearm. Now, obviously, given the forearms and things like it always somehow gets inflamed. And I said to the doctor, I said, listen here, isn't it going to be a thing where it needs to be removed or anything like it? He's like, well, no. Just as long as it doesn't change color or get bigger, you'll be fine. So I know I've had a
Yeah.
good match if my whole forearm here is swollen.
Yep, that sounds about right. We were on a show the other night and someone was absolutely fine. They wrestled their match, then an hour later they walked up and had just a massive ball in their elbow and they're like, didn't even hit my elbow, but hey ho.
Go,
Giant
yeah,
yep.
go figure. Go figure. We need to
Yeah.
discuss the elephant in the room.
Uh-oh.
Vinnie Mac.
Oh, hold on, you're cutting out, sorry.
Yeah. Vincent Kennedy McMahon.
Vince.
What was your opinion on the whole retirement thing?
To be honest, I don't really know how I feel about it because I think in recent times, obviously, he's been involved in some really difficult sort of behavior and accusations and those sort of things. And it's not the
Mm,
first time, and it probably won't be the last time either. I think Vince McMahon has done an absolutely, obviously, ridiculous amount for professional wrestling. Um, but I think sometimes it is good to step. He'll retire now. He'll probably come back like every retired person does
sure,
eventually.
sure.
um, but I think sometimes time away from these things is a good thing. I think with everything going on in the moment in probably his personal life with these accusations and those sort of things, it's not a bad thing that he steps
Sure.
down. Um, but for wrestling itself, he's a very influential person. Wrestling wouldn't be really, wrestling wouldn't have the platform it does without his
True.
actions, and
True.
so it's a very intense thing. But I think in terms of everything else, it's probably the right thing to do at the moment.
Right. And today it was announced. Actually, I think about South African time about 2 hours ago, that Triple H will be taking over the creator for WWE.
Yeah, I saw that. I personally think quite highly of Triple H, and I liked what he did before. So I think that is a really good thing. I think that there will be a lot of kind of positive influence. And from what I can tell, and kind of the people I speak to, that a lot of people feel the same way. A lot of people really like the direction that Triple H has taken things before, especially like NXT way and that sort of thing. So I think it's quite exciting. I think it'll be a really good thing.
Do you think that some of the people that were released from the company would now Triple H would reach out to them and say to them, okay, listen here, you were gotten rid of for certain reasons and things like that. Vince didn't see a vision for you, but I see a vision for you. Do you think that'll open
Yeah,
up the door for some of these guys to come back?
yeah, I think that's 100% kind of a possibility. Funny enough, a couple wrestlers I know were talking about it in the car this weekend.
Mm.
And they were saying that they wouldn't be surprised if like someone like Killer Cross came back, as at the time Triple H was really, really thought really highly of him.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, but then he was released. So I think he's a really kind of possible person to come back. I definitely think so because I think, just because one person doesn't see potential, doesn't mean someone else doesn't. And fresh ideas are always a good thing. And, Triple H will have such an insight into all the people that they've released and what they're capable of. And,
sure.
at the end of the day, when you are that person who has the say to hire and fire and bring back and let go these people, um, in a way, sometimes your vision is the one that matters, not everyone else around you. So I
Right.
think it's a huge opportunity for those released.
Okay. And in terms of some of the people that are still in the company, and I'm thinking more along the lines of Bobby Roode or Tommaso Ciampa or those type of guys that are floundering on their main roster. Do you think this is their reawakening, so to speak? Because Triple H was high on those guys, and when they come up to the main roster, uh, Pritchard and Laurinaitis and them just have no clue on how to book them because they don't watch NXT. They think it's a developmental thing.
Yeah, and I think I definitely, yeah, I would say I think that's I think the fact that Bobby Roode isn't quite like used as much as he could be. I think he is such a brilliant wrestler. I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
he is fantastic. I'd like to see him come back. Or not come back, sorry, but I'd like to see him kind of used more prominently and booked properly. I think that would be really, really good for the company. I mean, he just looks like a star, doesn't he? I mean, I
Yeah,
know that
absolutely.
he looks fantastic and he is a brilliant, brilliant wrestler. Um, but yeah, I think you're right. I think it's not just about the people who are released. It's about the people who are brought up, signed, whatever, brought onto the main roster, and then
Sure.
learn how to use properly and not use properly. And the stories, they're not used to their full potential. And I think all of that will kind of come right back to what does this person, or what does Triple H see in them? What does Triple H know that they are capable of? What is their shining factor? And using that.
Okay, all right. I heard that just before all of these things happen, about a month or so before, he asked Bobby Roode to work with Omos
Okay,
to
I didn't hear that.
to school Omos up at the PC, to get him
Right,
more fluid in the ring. Um,
right.
what is your take on the older generation? Not grabbing a guy and saying, "Hey, let me work with you." Being told, "Hey, listen, you school this guy up. He's
Mm,
not where we want him, but we see big potential in him. Um,
yeah.
we need you to polish him up a little bit." Are you a fan of that, or do you think it's when a guy comes into a situation like that, he should already be polished and be able to work in a situation?
So I think that of course you should, in some ways, try to get ready so you don't, or stay ready so you don't have to get ready.
Yeah.
But we are always improving in wrestling. Every single one of us can learn something new and can be better and that sort of thing. And I think for vets to be said to be told, can you go work with this guy to make them better? That's the type of stuff I love. Those
Mhm.
moments for me, obviously not on such a grand scale, but those are the moments for me that I've really seen big kind of boosts in my career, in my talent, and that sort of thing is when I get to work with a vet that knows what they're doing, that's really good at what they do.
Right.
And I think that's really good because I think, like I said, we never stop learning. And you have, especially on WWE's roster, these veterans who are incredibly talented
Mhm.
and they are just absolute buckets of knowledge. And I like to think that anybody who gets to work with any of these guys, even if you're the guy on the bottom, is told, actually, you know, you need to get a bit better. So let's pair you up with this guy. It's an honor to work with these people. It's an honor to keep learning.
Sure.
So I think it's fantastic that they do that. And I know that sometimes we'll get guys to kind of go step back down on, like, to NXT, for example, to kind of help these story runs and that sort of thing. But I think it's great. I think it's I think it's one of the best ways of learning that there is.
Sure, sure. Now, subversely, on the other side of the coin, um, I was reading something on Sportskeeda where they were talking about the style versus substance debate.
Mm.
Now, when I say style versus substance, you get a guy that, like, for example, Dean Malenko, who was a
Mm.
fantastic technical wrestler, but he didn't have personality. And then you
Yeah,
get a guy that's not a great wrestler, um, but he's able to learn and he's got a ton of personality. Um, they said, well, if the guy doesn't have the skills but he's got great personality, they'd rather bring him, they'd rather school him up than a guy that's brilliantly technically, but he's got the personality of the coconut fibers. You know what I'm saying? So
oh, yeah,
once again, it's the style versus substance thing. I had great teachers, but I love learning. I mean, every Tuesday and Thursday, I still end up going to training, not because I'm training anybody else, but because they can, even though been in the business for 2 3 weeks, they can still teach you something.
yeah, yeah.
Right.
I think I've always been under the impression that I I mean, I've never been the most naturally athletic person, but I like to think I have a great in-ring personality. And
Hmm.
one thing I've learned over my career is that you can teach wrestling moves and fluidness, and you can teach the technical stuff. You might never be the most crisp wrestler in the world,
Sure.
um, but from my personal experience, I think it's harder to teach people to have personality than to be better athletes.
Okay.
Yeah,
Taking
but
a
that's
step.
just and the people that I know,
Sure.
the people that I know that are really good athletes that don't have a personality seem to struggle a bit more than vice versa.
Right. Right. The last time we spoke, we were in the midst of probably the worst pandemic to hit us in 100 years. How has it been traveling and going across the pond and back again for wrestling shows and things like that? Does it feel a bit like going back to normal?
So it definitely does feel like it's starting to go back to normal. I was lucky enough to go to Austria again a few months ago.
Hmm.
Um, and it was quite weird because we all had to wear masks in the airport, whereas in England we don't have to wear masks. So obviously, depending on what country you go to, there's still quite a lot of restrictions. We went to America earlier in the year, didn't have to wear any sort of like masks, and all you had to do is take a COVID test. And then we came to Canada, and you don't have to COVID test, but you do have to wear masks. And like, I think it's really intense because it does slowly feel like things are going back to normal. But there are definitely a lot of kind of everlasting complications,
Hmm. Hmm.
and kind of restrictions in place. But it feels great, to be able to kind of get on the road again, and it 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 restores a lot of my kind of faith in pro wrestling to go internationally. I
Right.
haven't been able to do like a massive amount yet internationally. There hasn't been like an absolute, influx of stuff. But I've just been home, and then I get home for 2 days and I work two 12-hour shifts and then drive to Scotland straight after. And then we're there for 26 days, and then we come back home for 2.5 weeks, and then we're out to America. So, it definitely feels like it's starting to get back to normal again.
Sure.
So
Sure.
that's so exciting.
Right. Okay. Do you have you seen in this break of the pandemic and now getting back into normal, a lot more federations went home based. Instead of getting a guys in, they started to focus on the guys, maybe some of the talent that didn't have a chance if an international had came in, and they said, right, we're going to school you up now, and you're finding that there's a lot bigger pool of wrestlers, maybe not top tier talent, but decent middle of the road guys that could get there with a few more years worth of training.
So I think there's a few really big factors into this. So I think one of them is, first of all, the pandemic shuts everything down so people don't have to work, right?
Right.
And then slowly, as wrestling training opens, people, big issue with people, I don't know if it's the same in South Africa, but people who wrestling train for wrestling over here, they'll start training, then they'll go, oh, I have to work. Oh, I have to do this. Oh, I've got these plans. Oh, I can't make it. Well, of course, there's restrictions in having the wrestling training open in the first place,
Hmm.
but still life wasn't back to normal for ages. So people didn't have work. People didn't have events and parties and stuff they had to go to. So people had a lot more time to kind of when they're in the beginning of starting their journeys, for example,
Right.
a lot more time to kind of dedicate to the early stages. Then you add on the fact that you can't bring other people in, and that in England, for example, it was very county based, so you could only
Yeah.
travel within your county when you were allowed to travel. So people would start to do wrestling shows, but they could only use local people to their county. Um, and then I think they get comfortable with that, right? Because you start to obviously build up your heels and your faces, and you get your storylines going. And then I think on top of that, you then have your cost of living rise.
Right.
You add that to everything. You add the fact that it costs a bloody fortune to bring people in now. It costs a fortune to drive a car across England, whereas, you used to be able to do it for 40, 50 quid. Well, now
Sure.
it's 80, 90, 100 quid. Um, and I think that you combine all three of those things, and actually everyone's just really comfortable using the people close with them and who they've got. And to be honest, I don't blame them, because it might have used to cost you $3,000 to run a wrestling show, and now it'll cost you $5,000 to run a wrestling
Sure.
show. So of course you're going to try to budget and keep people keep your costs as cheap as possible. But yeah, so I think the pandemic has definitely, for international wrestlers or wrestlers who get out there a lot, it's put definitely a bit of a kibosh on things.
Right, right. Now, from the last time we spoke, not the Vince thing withstanding and things like it. There's been a lot of I don't want to use the term drama in professional wrestling, but there's been a lot of weird stuff happening. Forbidden Door happened. Sasha and Naomi walked out. Just recently now with the ROH Death Before Dishonor, Jonathan Gresham. He cussed out Tony Khan now, and he wants to leave and things like that. Do you think the with this pandemic thing happening, people have had to take a look at their current plans and say, listen here, professional wrestling as it wasn't working. How are we going to do things different? How are we going to how can we include everybody but exclude some people?
Mm.
What has that put into your mind in terms of how you prepare to train, how you prepare for your matches, how you book yourself,
Mm.
getting out there?
Yeah, I think I think a big part of it is that, as you said, I think people it gave a lot of people time to recognize whether wrestling was working for them or wasn't working. Whether people were saying, "Is this my career or is this my hobby?" Right? Because it took a lot to hold on to wrestling in the pandemic, and if you weren't fully invested, then holding on to it was really, really challenging.
Mhm.
I think then you add in the fact that also things like speaking out happened during the pandemic, right? That obviously added a massive layer of saying, well, how do we keep everyone included and invested, but keep out these handful of people
Yeah,
that we don't want around? And I think it made a lot of people just really question if they were happy and content with where they were. And I think for a lot of people, it made them really consider what matters, because it relates in real life and it'll relate in wrestling as well. That, companies like WWE, even when the whole world was shut down, some people were still on the road working all the time.
yeah, yeah,
Some people, and obviously it won't just be about wrestling, it'll be about people's personal lives and the fact that some people were away from their families for ages and then still have to, face the kind of consequences of COVID.
right.
And, I personally think COVID had a massive shift in people's personal mental health mentalities, saying that people are realizing what's important to them, who treats them poorly, who treats them well,
Yeah,
what their morals are. Because I think a lot of people during this pandemic realize that life is too short to be putting up with people that they don't like, or to have to work with people they don't like, or to have to be put into situations that aren't fair. So I personally believe that I think everyone's just gotten a bit fed up, and people realize now that life's too short to sit in silence and not kind of stand up for what you believe in, or you know, only work for one company,
yeah,
and
yeah.
I think people have just kind of put their foots down, like, and said, actually, I'm not happy, or this isn't enough.
Right, right.
And
Well, that was leading into my next question. Are you a fan of Forbidden Door type events, like where you get the Ishis versus Moxleys and all of that stuff. You're a fan of that?
Yeah, I think the idea behind Forbidden Door is great. Um I think that wrestling's a big industry, but it's not a big industry
Yeah,
compared to every
yeah,
other sport, you know. And I always think we want like I know people are draws in different companies and their storylines, whatever. But I always think like, why would we ever want to stop people from getting work? Why would we, why not get as much work as possible and work together? And the idea behind Forbidden Door, people loved it. People were freaking out at the prospect of people crossing companies and working for each other. When Mickey James brought the Impact title and worked on WWE, people lost it
yeah.
because they were like, "Oh my God, this is incredible." When actually, it probably would have done both companies a lot of good. You know.
Mm-hmm. Not
So
not to mention the fact that I've got like the hugest crush on Mickey James. I'm not even gonna lie.
yeah,
I'm not
she's
even gonna lie.
phenomenal. She's
Yeah, no,
fantastic.
well, I haven't met her, but I wouldn't.
Yeah.
I'd totally fanboy. I'm not even joking too. Um, speak. Okay, let's ask the question. Have you ever met a professional wrestler and you totally fanned out, like just like gushed and
Um, So when I was younger, I definitely did all the time. Because my dad and I used to meet a lot of wrestlers when we would travel to Orlando.
Mhm.
And like Impact Wrestling always did meet and greets and that sort of thing. I remember when I was a kid, Jeff Hardy was my favorite wrestler, and they were doing a meet and greet, but they didn't announce that he'd be there. They had announced like Matt Hardy, Jeff Jarrett, and Rob Van Dam,
Yeah,
but that was it. Um, and I was sat eating my dinner at the Hard Rock Cafe, and the elevator opened, and two security guards came out, and Jeff Hardy walked between them. And I remember as a kid being like, "Oh my God, my favorite wrestler just walked in. I had no idea that he'd be here," and that sort of thing. Um, that's always like a really core memory that sticks out in my head. And another memory that sticks out in my head is when I met Hulk Hogan.
oh yeah,
Think I didn't think that I would, to me, I was like, oh my God, it's Hulk Hogan. But I was like, it's just another wrestler. Like, it's fine. When I met him, like, his presence it's such a big presence. And I'll never forget, like, even something so stupid as the size of his hands. I went to shake his hand and I literally, the only person I know who has smaller hands than me is my mom. I've got the tiniest hands. I stuck my hand out and I was like, shaking, and his hand was like that big, and I'll never forget it. And he was so nice. And I just remember thinking, oh my God, this is so freaking cool because
did
it's Hulk Hogan.
did you blush a little bit there when you said you saw Jeff Hardy when you were eating?
Yeah, yeah.
I noticed that. I
As
noticed
a
that.
as a kid, I was like absolutely obsessed with Jeff Hardy. Like, I loved Jeff Hardy as a
Yeah,
kid. He
yeah,
was he was funny enough, which I always say is quite funny because like my wrestling style is absolutely nothing like Jeff Hardy. But as a kid, I was typical like, kid. I mean, when I was a kid, every kid's favorite wrestler was Jeff Hardy.
yeah,
But
yeah,
I'll never forget it. I'll just thinking about it now. I just think of like my childhood heart, how excited I was in that moment. Like,
yeah, yeah. I,
so
I,
cool.
I, I wasn't the same, but I was similar when my one friend of mine and I met RVD, and we
Yeah,
signed autographs, and everybody left, and we were just hanging around, and we were talking about, because at that stage Justin Gabriel, PJ Black was still in the WWE, and we were talking about how he trained in our dojo, and we trained with him and everything like that. And he took like an extra 15 minutes out of his time just to like have it sit down and have a chat with us. So cool. Who was the
yeah.
one wrestler that was a total? I hesitate to use the word dick, but who was the one guy where you're like, hi, how's it going, and things like that, and they just fobbed you off. One person, shall I say?
I remember it's really interesting actually. One of my kind of it's probably one of my only reels. Actually, the when I was a kid, I would have been about 7 or 8 at the time.
Hmm.
Um, I was inside at a wrestling show helping with setup, and the Honky Tonk Man was there, and I had a Honky Tonk Man action figure that I really wanted signed.
Right.
Uh, and I walked up to him before the doors were open because he was sat at his merch table, And I was like, "Oh, excuse me, sir, could you please sign my wrestling figure?" And he like got really angry and was like, "You need to wait." And like, but I my
Wow.
when I was wrestling, like when I was in these shows early, my dad always used to say, "Go up nice and quiet and polite, and just say, 'Excuse me, sir, will you sign this, please?'" So from a very young age, it was very like, don't bug people, ask politely, you know, and that sort of thing. And I, it's one of those weird ones that always stuck with me because I was like, I remember how scared I was to ask for his autograph in the first place, and
And then it,
then
and then it was such a
he was,
punk ass.
and then he was a bit mean. I'm not gonna lie. Um, but yeah, that was one of my childhood memories. And then another one I have, I would have been about 10 years old, I reckon, maybe 11, and I was at an airport and I saw the Usos,
Yeah.
uh, and um, I was 11. I was like, "Are you the Usos? Can I have a photo with you?" And they were like, "We're not the Usos," and walked off, basically.
Oh man.
But it was like it was definitely them, because and I walked up to my dad and I was like, they said they weren't the Usos, and my dad was like, "They definitely were,"
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but then I met them another time after that, I think like a year or two later, and they were really really nice. So I must have just caught them on a
Caught them
bad day.
on a bad
Um,
day.
yeah, I met our truth at an airport once, and he sat and talked to me for about 20 minutes when
Yeah.
I was
I
just a kid. It
he
was
he
cool.
comes he comes across as a really just like a really nice person.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So that's
He's very,
cool. That's cool.
and I
No.
didn't care. I was a kid. I didn't have anything to talk about, but he went out of his way to sit and talk for 20 minutes, and I thought that was the coolest thing ever.
Awesome. Awesome. That's man, I appreciate that. You know, being a heel. Now I don't know if you've experienced this. I haven't seen your heel work, to be perfectly honest with you. I've only seen you as a face. The slapping of the hands and the taking of the autographs and things like this. Now, I'm not a believer per se, but when you're at the show and you're a bad guy, when you walk in, you're a heel, and when you work, you're a heel, and afterwards, when you're signing autographs, high autographs, photographs, things like that, you don't engage them. Then when you're
Mm,
out of the show, you're out of that area of wrestling, and you're walking around and people come up to you. That's when you say, okay, listen here, we're friendly, take photographs and be nice and everything like that. Um, I'd still that part, I still keep the reality of that part. Do you think that's sometimes missing in professional wrestling, where the bad guy comes out and he's giving the bad guy promo, and then he slaps hands with the fans and tries to joke with the fans and things like that? Um,
yeah,
do you think that's missing in pro wrestling at the moment?
I definitely do. I think the troubling thing. So like, I actually primarily work heel nowadays.
Yeah.
I'm not babyface very often. But one thing I've noticed is that it's kind of, to me, I always ask the promoter what they want,
Hmm.
because I find a lot of promoters I work for now, which is so different to promoters I used to work for. A lot of promoters don't care if you're face or heel and want you
Yeah.
to go out and sign autographs, because fans nowadays just know that they can meet every wrestler on the show. They just have to wait long enough. And I think so many promoters now want to keep the fans happy because they want their money in their pockets,
Hmm.
that they'll
Hmm.
say, "Oh, it doesn't matter if you're face or heel, can you go sign autographs, please?" You know?
Yeah.
Whereas when I started working heel, I would very much try to not like interact as much with people, or if I did interact, be very much in character and that sort of thing. Um, what I've learned is that not all promoters like that. So I kind of base it off of what a promoter wants. Because if the promoter wants to try to, keep kayfabe as strong as possible, and keep the kind of heel work as strong as possible, then I won't go out. But like I said, I work for a lot of people now who just want to keep the fans happy and don't really care too much about um, kind of keeping that storyline and going,
Right.
I guess.
Right.
So I
Okay.
definitely think it's because I think it keeps that element of, you know, people will go, "Oh, I hate Madison when she's in the ring, but she's such a nice person," right? And then you think,
Mm.
"Oh, well, you haven't
Yeah. No,
really
I get you.
100% have you. If you want people to absolutely despise you, then you know, going out and shaking their hands and giving them a hug and taking a picture might not get you that heat."
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
I get you. I get
It
that.
also has to be done correctly as well.
Mhm.
But not all promoters want people in character all the time. Again, for the sake of chasing anybody away,
Right.
you know.
Or the fact that um, at the some guys put their merch out at the beginning of a show, and some guys put
Yeah,
their merch out at an end of a show. Now, if you're going to be a if you're going to be a good bad guy in the beginning of the show, they're not going to want to buy your merch at the end. So if you want to make a
yeah,
bit of extra money, how do you
yeah,
balance?
yeah.
You know.
And I think that's the thing is like, a lot of times fans will buy merch beforehand and then realize that the person's a heel, and then they're like, oh, and then, but then I think when you get really good heat, like I've had times where people will, like, I haven't gone out at the beginning of the show as a heel, and people will buy my promo pictures, and by the end of the match, they're ripping up the thing that they just spent their money on because they don't care that much. And I think, well, if that's the case, then you've done your job, haven't you?
Well, here we go. Madison, I'm not going to keep you for much longer, but I do want to ask one question before we go. Right.
Yeah.
SummerSlam is coming up. Right.
Yep.
I'm going to ask three things of you, and I want your opinion. Okay.
Hmm.
Liv versus Ronda. Does Ronda get it back, or does Liv retain?
I hope Liv retains.
Right.
I want Liv to retain, but
Okay.
it's Ronda. But
Yeah.
it's Ronda.
Okay.
So, so I think it's questionable. I think they should leave it. The WWE Universe was very happy when Liv won.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very happy. I hope they stick with it. I think they should. Whether they will, I don't know.
The second thing, who is going to have a better match, Pat McAfee or Paul, or Jake Paul, or Logan Paul? Sorry.
I'm not gonna lie. I thought Logan Paul's debut was so good. You know, a lot of people don't like the guy because he's not a wrestler and whatever, but he's got a massive following. He clearly trained very, very hard. Um, McAfee is, he's good, but I actually have a lot of time for Logan Paul as a
Right.
wrestler. I do for McAfee as well, um, I would put my money on Logan Paul.
Does Austin Theory cash in after the Last Man Standing match, or during the Last Man Standing match?
I think realistically that would probably be a smart storyline to go by, considering it's last man standing, meaning that the person should be dead by the end,
Yeah.
right? That seems like it'd be the smart time to capitalize, but I don't know if they'll have both cash-ins. I guess there's still another when is SummerSlam, beginning of August or end? I don't know the
It's
date of
next
it.
weekend. It's next
Next
weekend.
weekend.
Or this
Don't know
weekend.
if they
One of them.
I don't know if they'd have both cashed in so quickly, but presumably storyline wise, I would think that would be, if you think of it in a realistic point of view, right? And when would be the smartest time for someone to cash in? I would think that would be it.
Okay, this is a side question because I asked for three. So if I ask one more, will you indulge me just for a second?
Yes, yes, yes.
Do you think they setting it up now so that Cody gets a title at WrestleMania next year? He wins the Rumble. Theory lasts up until Mania,
I
and then they
think,
get the title on
yeah.
Cody.
To be honest, it wouldn't surprise me. I reckon they're gonna really. I mean, they've pushed Cody quite a bit, haven't they? But I think, given those exceptional circumstances, that is a very high possibility. I think of what they're going to do. I think a title on Cody at the next WrestleMania is very much a card in the books. I think they're probably trying to. I'm a believer that I think they're probably trying to keep everyone involved happy, and everyone would, there's speculations from the beginning, wasn't there, that if Cody was to return, that there'd be a lot of agreements in place, a lot of things kind of decided, a lot of, they had to come to terms on these agreements and all that stuff. So I think so. I think that's what they'll do.
Awesome. Madison, it is coming. It is coming close to the time where CPW has all got all their ducks in a row. I know Mark is still awesomely keen to bring you out. I cannot wait to have you in South Africa, and I want to thank you again for coming back onto the show and giving us some of your wrestling knowledge as well.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I am so excited. South Africa is the #1 place on my list at the moment that I am dying to wrestle. Spoke to Mark recently, and I obviously saw about you guys signing those contracts and stuff for what's the company called off the top of my head? Sorry, I can't
Well, for the
remember.
Arnolds. For the Arnolds.
Yes, yeah. I just think it's fantastic, and I mean, the photos clearly show how much South Africa loves wrestling.
Yeah.
And I know Charlie and I are just absolutely buzzing to finally come there. So fingers crossed, it won't be too much longer. I'm so excited. And
Awesome.
It'll be lovely to meet you. And, maybe we can do some sit down interviews in person.
Yeah. Don't get too keen to see me. I am a bit of a, not nice guy in the ring, also outside the ring. No, I'm only kidding. It's the other way around.
That's all right. We like those people.
There
like
we
those
go.
people.
Maddison, once again, thank you very much for your time. I do appreciate it. Guys, go and check out Maddison Miles on YouTube and Facebook and things like that. Everything, all her social medias will be in the beginning of the video. Go and check it out, man. And Maddison, once again, I thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much, Donovan.
All right. Loudmouth presents Off the Top Rope, uncensored, uncut, and on the wavelength of Austin Theory. Thank you very much.